Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back in time way back to when castles weren't dreamy tourist destinations or fantasy movie backdrops, but drafty stone freezers that smelled faintly of smoke, stew, and despair. You're not some modern traveler with a heated blanket and a thermostat. No, tonight you're sleeping in a medieval castle during winter and you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing that hits you is the cold and ancient, living thing that seeps through the soles of your boots the moment you step inside the castle's massive gate. The guards give you a nod that says, "Welcome to your misery." Above you, a gray sky droops over turrets rimed in frost, and smoke curls weakly from the great hall chimney like it's too tired to try. You imagine yourself snuggled by a roaring hearth with a goblet of mulled wine. But that fantasy dies as quickly as your toes do. You shuffle into the great hall, the pride of the place, enormous, vaulted, echoing, impressive. Yes, but warmer than the outside. Barely. Your breath clouds the air. The rushes on the floor crunch with frozen debris, and somewhere a hound sneezes. The walls, thick enough to stop an army, seem to radiate dampness. You can feel it soaking into your clothes, settling into your bones. The stone doesn't insulate hoards the cold like a miser. A servant pale, shivering, and missing at least one tooth hands you a cup of something steaming. It's ale, lukewarm and yeasty. You thank them, trying not to stare at the icicle forming on their sleeve. "It's always like this," they mutter. "Better than the plague, I suppose." He nods, wondering if that's really true. Every step you take echoes like thunder through the hall. Banners flutter from the rafters, faded, stiff with frost. The torches sputter, and the smoke curls down instead of up because the chimney, naturally, doesn't draw properly in the wind. You start to realize that the medieval castle isn't a cozy refuge. It's a fortress first, home second. And comfort comes somewhere around 10th place. You find your sleeping quarters, or what passes for them, a small chamber off the main hall, with a door that refuses to shut all the way. You tug it closed anyway, feeling a draft sneak in like an uninvited ghost. There's a narrow window slit meant for shooting arrows, not admiring the view. Outside, snowflakes spiral in lazy confusion, sticking to the stone and melting into slick patches that will soon refreeze. Historians still argue whether people in medieval castles truly slept alone or huddled together in groups for warmth, judging by the size of your room and a single bed that looks suspiciously like a wooden crate with straw stuffed inside. You're praying it's a group thing tonight. A passing friar pauses to bless your chamber, perhaps to protect you from the chill, or perhaps from the rats. You thank him anyway. The smell of burning tallow from a nearby candle makes your stomach turn, and you notice the walls glisten faintly with moisture. It's not condensation. It's centuries of damp stone sighing under the weight of winter. You pace to keep warm. Your boots squeak. The air feels thick with the ghost of every breath exhaled by those who've slept, frozen here before you. Outside, you hear the clatter of hooves in the courtyard, muffled by snow. Somewhere, a gate creaks. The castle's rhythms are steady, unhurried, and utterly indifferent to your suffering. In a strange way, there is beauty in that indifference. The walls have seen worse: sieges, famine, betrayal. Your shivering is just another chapter in their long, frosty story. The lord of the castle passes by on his way to supper, wrapped in fur and flanked by guards. He barely notices you. His footsteps fade, leaving behind only the sound of dripping water, probably from the ceiling. You start to imagine that each drop is a countdown to the moment you stop feeling your fingers. For warmth, you find yourself edging toward the great hall again. The fire, a massive one, roars in a stone hearth, so deep it could fit a small car. But the moment you sit near it, smoke stings your eyes. It curls and lingers, unwilling to leave through the crooked chimney. Everyone's coughing, but no one moves away. This fire is life itself. You hold your hands close, feeling the faintest touch of heat, but your back is still freezing. It's like being roasted and refrigerated at the same time. Someone tells you, with a grim humor, that castles were often colder inside than outside during winter. That's a real historical fact. The thick stone walls took so long to warm that they simply never did. Even fires, blazing day and night, couldn't chase out the damp. People layered clothes like onions, and still, the chill one. A dog curls up beside you. You feel a small flicker of gratitude. The animal radiates more heat than the hearth. You pet it, and it sighs, probably judging you for being unprepared. You wonder if this is how nights survived, by befriending anything warm and furry. A young kitchen boy runs past, trailing smoke in panic. You catch a whiff of burning bread, and everyone groans. Food may be scarce, but accidents are plentiful. At least we'll get some warmth from the oven fire, someone jokes. You almost laugh, mostly to keep your teeth from chattering. As night deepens, the castle quiets, though not completely. The wind howls through cracks in the arrow slits, creating an eerie, almost musical moan. You try to convince yourself it's the wind and not the lament of some long dead. Night, regretting his real estate choices. When you finally crawl into your straw bed, you realize the blanket provided feels suspiciously damp. You pull it tighter anyway, curling up like a question mark, wondering when, if ever, you'll thaw. The dog hops up beside you. The two of you, unlikely allies, share breath and warmth, while frost creeps along the walls like silver vines as your eyelids grow heavy. You think about how people endured this without electric blankets, central heating, or even the knowledge that winter would eventually end. It's humbling in a cold, cruel kind of way. Tomorrow, you'll learn the cruel truth of these stone walls, but for now, you drift into uneasy sleep, your dreams full of crackling fires that actually work. You wake to the sound of dripping water, and the kind of cold that doesn't just sting your skin. It feels like it's tattooing itself into your bones. The dog has abandoned you, traitor that it is, probably off to find someone who smells more like bacon. You stretch, and the movement sends a shiver down your spine. The straw mattress crinkles beneath you, releasing a puff of dust and something that smells faintly of mildew and mouse. Congratulations, you've survived the night in your first medieval castle. Barely the moment you swing your legs out of bed, your bare feet meet the flagstones. Instantly, you understand why socks were once considered a sign of wealth. The stones are colder than honesty, and far less forgiving. You hop in place, muttering something modern and unrepeatable, and pull your boots on fast. The leather is stiff, almost frozen. You think longingly of heated floors, and maybe your next life. You open your door and are greeted by a corridor. It looks like it was designed by someone who hated warmth. Every surface gleams with condensation. A torch flickers weakly on the wall, its light doing nothing to lift the gloom. The castle breathes cold through every crack and crevice. You run a hand along the stone, expecting solid strength. Instead, feel moisture slicking your fingertips. The wall feels alive, sweating in the cold. That's the irony of medieval architecture. Those thick stone walls everyone admires were the best defense against invaders, but the worst against winter. The builders weren't worried about comfort. They were worried about arrows, battering rams, and siege ladders. Thermal efficiency. Never heard of her. You pause, listening. Somewhere deep inside the walls, water trickles. It's not a leak, it's condensation from the difference between the freezing air outside and the meager warmth within. Historians still argue whether castle builders understood how their designs trapped dampness, or if they simply accepted mold as a roommate. A servant appears, carrying a bucket. Their breath clouds the air like a ghost. My lord's orders, they mumble. Keep the hearths lit. You follow them into the great hall, curious. The fire from last night is a faint memory now a few embers glowing like tired eyes. The servant kneels, feeds it, logs, and blows gently. Smoke curls up, then back down again. You cough. So much for fresh morning air. Stone eats heat, they mutter, like a proverb. Takes all night to warm, all day to lose it. Can see what they mean. The walls drink up the fire's energy like a sponge and give back nothing but damn peas silence. One historical record from the 14th century mentions that castles could be so cold in winter that ink froze in inkwells and the water in wash basins turned to ice. You picture yourself trying to write a letter in this climate. Dear Mom, send socks. You wander down the hall, rubbing your hands together, trying to find a warm pocket of air. There are none. Even the tapestries on the walls, those magnificent, colorful weaving songs, stiff and cold to the touch. They were meant to insulate, but really, they just covered the damp with pictures of slightly happier people. You notice frost patterns creeping up the inside of the wall. Delicate and cruelly beautiful. They look like the artwork of winter itself, signing its name on the stones. You lean close, and your breath makes them melt slightly, as if you've offended them. Someone in the corner is muttering about spirits, apparently. When the castle moans at night, that's the souls of the dead, trapped in the walls. You'd laugh, but the acoustics are unsettlingly convincing. The truth is simpler, though. When the air temperature changes suddenly, those thick walls expand and contract, producing eerie groans that sound like complaints from the afterlife. You pass a cluster of servants, polishing armor that looks far too shiny to wear in this chill. One of them tells you, with a grin, that knights used to warm their armor by the fire before battle in winter, 'cause metal that cold could literally stick to their skin. You imagine trying to peel yourself off a breastplate mid-duel. Not heroic. Another servant chimes in with a fringe tidbit. Some castle walls were rumored to have hollow spaces inside them, not for secret passages, but to trap air as primitive insulation. Whether it worked is debatable. Judging by your shivering, probably not. A gust of wind rushes through the corridor, extinguishing a torch. Instinctively, you flinch. The draft feels almost sentient, like the castle's way of reminding you who's in charge. You pull your cloak tighter, but the chill slides underneath, determined, as you step outside into the courtyard. The sun, light what little of it there is, hits your face. It's weak, pale, filtered through the morning fog. You'd think the open air would be colder than inside, but it's not. Out here, at least, the damp can escape. The irony makes you laugh softly to yourself. The castle protects you from enemies, yes, but not from frostbite. You walk along the inner wall walk, boots crunching on frost. The battlements are rimed in ice, and the stones glisten like they've been lacquered. You lean on the parapet, looking out over the fields below. Snow stretches in every direction. Smoke rises from a few peasant cottages, thin trails curling into the gray sky. For a brief, traitorous moment, you envy them their thatched roofs, their low ceilings, their proximity to actual fire. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were, some ways, warmer than nobles in castles. Their homes were smaller, easier to heat, and often shared with livestock for warmth. Meanwhile, you, the noble guest, are freezing in your luxury fortress, surrounded by banners and misery. As the morning passes, the castle begins to stir. Maids carry linens, stiff with frost. A cook yells about frozen butter. Someone drops a pewter mug, and it clangs like a church bell. The sound echoes off the walls in a dozen directions, each one bouncing back colder. By midday, you've accepted that warmth isn't coming. The walls, proud and ancient, are immovable in their indifference. You press your palm against one, feeling the cold pulse like a heartbeat beneath your skin. This place was built for power, not comfort for endurance, not ease. And somehow, that realization humbles you. As you head back toward the great hall, you catch a glimpse of the high windows. Light streams in illuminating dust motes like drifting snowflakes. The scene is oddly beautiful, even in its misery. Maybe that's why people stayed, because even in the freezing dark, there was grandeur. But grandeur won't save your toes. You sink down near the hearth again, wrapping your cloak around your shoulders, and mutter to yourself, next time I'm booking the peasant cottage. You'd think by now you'd earned some warmth. You've survived a night in straw, breathed in centuries of damp, and lost feeling in your fingers. Surely the castle owes you a little heat, right? Wrong. The morning fire mocks you with its half-hearted flicker, so you shuffle closer, rubbing your palms together like a supplicant before a false god. The hearth itself is monumental, an architectural marvel. Really? Big enough to roast an ox, framed by soot-blackened stone. It's ground with an iron hood, so heavy it looks like it could crush a knight's ego. You'd imagine that such a fireplace could heat an entire hall. In practice, it barely heats the knees of whoever sits directly in front of it. Everyone else might as well be standing outside. The servants call it the Great Hearth, though you suspect the adjective is more about its size than its performance. You sit down on a bench, shifting uncomfortably as smoke swirls around your head. The chimney doesn't draw well, which means the smoke prefers to take scenic detours, first across your face, then through your lungs, and finally out the nearest door if it feels generous. A cook clatters past, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. Better than no fire at all, she mutters. That's the motto of every winter morning here. You watch as she tosses logs onto the flames. The wood hisses like a snake. It's still damp. Properly seasoned wood is a luxury in winter when the forests are soggy and everything burns reluctantly. The smoke smells faintly of pine and despair. You shift your bench a few inches closer to the hearth, only to discover that it's one of those treacherous balancing acts. Sure, either too far away to feel warmth, or too close and risk setting your boots on fire. There's no in-between. Historians still argue whether medieval chimneys improved living conditions or just redistributed smoke creatively. Early castles didn't even have proper chimneys. Fires were lit in central pits, and the smoke drifted upward through a hole in the roof we refused to. That might sound rustic and cozy in theory, but in practice, it meant everyone smelled like a campfire and coughed like they'd been chain-smoking since birth. You glance upward, half expecting to see daylight through the cracks in the roof. Instead, you get a face full of smoke that makes your eyes water. You blink furiously, muttering that medieval people must have developed the third eyelid by necessity. Nearby, a knight tries to warm his hands, his armor creaking as he moves. The metal catches the light like frozen water. He chuckles darkly. Fire doesn't care for steel, he says. Takes more heat to warm me than it does to melt lead. You nod in sympathy, silently grateful that you're not the one sleeping in a tin can tonight. One servant offers you a curious remedy if you want to feel warmer. Put rosemary and ash in your boots. You raise an eyebrow, but she's serious. Apparently, the herb's scent distracts from the fact that your toes are dying. Fringe remedies like this were common people believed herbs had warming properties, though historians still debate whether that was spiritual warmth or just optimism. You pull your cloak tighter and look around. Everyone's doing the same dance too, near the fire, too far, constantly shifting like worshippers in a smoky temple. The fire pops, and a spray of embers leaps out. One lands on your sleeve. You pat it out fast, heart pounding. Congratulations, now experienced medieval heating and medieval hazard. The truth is, these fireplaces were more about symbolism than comfort. A roaring fire meant wealth, hospitality, power. Lords hosted feasts before the hearth, not because it was warm, but because it looked warm. The visual spectacle mattered more than the physical result. Sort of like a medieval version of central heating for Instagram. You notice soot marks crawling up the stone walls like black vines. Even the ceiling beams are coated in years of smoke residue. The air feels heavy, sticky with carbon and time. You cough again, wondering if people back then had lungs made of iron. Someone brings in a brazier, small metal basin filled with hot coals, and sets it near the far end of the hall. You approach eagerly, thinking this must be the medieval equivalent of a space heater. It is, sort of. The coals give off heat, but also a faint metallic temps. The servant warns you not to fall asleep beside it. Carbon monoxide poisoning wasn't understood yet, but its victims were common enough to earn superstitious explanations. They say the night spirits take the warm ones first, she whispers. You decide to sit upright. By midday, the fire's warmth finally seeps into the hall, but only a few feet around the hearth. Everywhere else, the cold reigns supreme. You wander toward a side corridor, and the temperature drops instantly. It's like stepping through a portal from mildly uncomfortable to glacial. You peek into another chamber, smaller, private one. The Lord's solar, maybe. There's another fireplace here, smaller but more elegant. The logs burn a little brighter, the air a little clearer. Maybe the nobles had the right idea after all. Fewer people, fewer drafts, better insulation from all those tapestries and hangings. You touch one of the walls. It's lined with wood paneling instead of bare stone. Warmth still eludes you, but at least the illusion is comforting. Still, even here, the fire is a fickle friend. It devours wood faster than servants can carry it. You overhear one complain that the forest is nearly stripped bare for fuel. All this just to keep the Lord's feet from freezing, he grumbles. You can't help but think of the environmental Toledo deforestation wasn't just about shipbuilding. It was about survival. A sudden crack from the fireplace startles you. The log splits with a sharp pop, sending sparks dancing through the air. Everyone flinches. You realize how much constant vigilance fire demand was both salvation and threat. A single stray ember could turn a cold castle into a hot ruin. Evening creeps in again, and you find yourself back where you started, huddled near the hearth, staring into the flames. The firelight paints the walls gold, disguising the cracks and soot. For a moment, the place almost feels alive, warm, flickering, breathing. But the illusion fades as soon as you shift, and the cold presses in again from every direction. Maybe warmth was never the point. Maybe this struggle, the endless tending, the constant smoke, the fight for every spark was part of what defined castle life. You think of all the people who lived here before you, all the generations who fought the same chill. Somehow they made it feel like home. You blow on your hands and whisper, "Good for them," before coughing up another lungful of smoke. You'd think that after enduring smoke, damp stone, and bone-deep chill, you'd at least have earned a cozy bed. Something soft, maybe warm. Something anything that doesn't itch, crawl, or smell faintly of livestock. But this is a medieval castle, where comfort is a rumor and hygiene is a negotiation. The sun's gone down again, and the great hall flickers with the glow of torches and the faint, greasy scent of tallow. You trudge back to your chamber, half expecting your bed to have developed sentience in your absence. The straw mattress looks roughly as inviting as a sack of gravel, and your blanket, let's be generous, resembles a flattened bear that's seen better centuries. You sit down, and the straw sighs under your weight, releasing a faint, earthy scent. That might sound romantic, like freshly cut hay. It's not. It's more wet barn after a thunderstorm. You pat the bed and immediately regret it. Something moves. Not much, but enough to make your soul itch. Historians still argue whether medieval bedding was truly as flea-ridden as popular imagination insists. But when you look down and see a speck that definitely isn't lint doing a suspicious little hop, the debate feels settled in your mind. You shake out the blanket just in case. A small cloud of dust and something that looks like ancient dandruff wafts into the air. You cough, muttering, "I've made worse hotel choices." The air tastes faintly of fur and centuries of sweat. You pull the cover up to your nose and immediately sneeze. Let's talk materials, because you're living the history lesson now. The blanket isn't made of cozy cotton. that's centuries away from common use. Instead, you've got furs, wolf, sheep, rabbit if you're lucky, rat if you're not. Fur was the medieval answer to insulation, but it came with its own ecosystem. Fleas loved it. Moths adored it. And when those pests multiplied, the castle's inhabitants didn't wash the blankets. They simply beat them and hoped for divine mercy. One servant once told you, or maybe you overheard it through a half-frozen wall, that noble women would perfume their furs with lavender or rosemary to mask the smell. Tonight, your fur smells faintly of smoke, dog, and regret. Still, it's all you have. So you pile on every scrap of cloth, cloak, and questionable pelt within reach. You resemble a medieval lasagna, layers upon layers of questionable warmth. You tuck yourself in tightly, partly for insulation, partly to trap any escaping courage. But here's the problem: furs and wool do keep you warm, yet they also trap moisture. And in a castle that's already humid from damp walls and smoldering fires, you're basically sleeping inside a very stylish sauna that doesn't get hot. Within minutes, your breath condenses on the inside of your covers. You pull them closer anyway, pretending it's comforting instead of clammy. You roll over, and the straw crunches beneath you. The bed creaks like an old door confessing sins. You glance up and notice the ceiling beams above dark with age, faintly glistening. The candlelight makes them look almost alive, like they're breathing with the cold. You imagine the wood shifting, tiny beetles crawling in the dark. Congratulations, sleep will not be coming quickly tonight. You hear movement down the corridor, the shuffle of servants batting down in the hall, the distant hum of conversation. Privacy wasn't really a thing back then. You weren't alone, even when you wanted to be. The great hall often doubled as a dormitory, with servants, guards, and sometimes guests, all sleeping in layers around the hearth. The lucky few got chambers like yours, though lucky is a relative term when you're fighting frostbite. A sudden scratching noise jolts you. You freeze. Then you see Eat a Rat, bold as royalty, scampering along the wall. It pauses, staring at you with beady eyes, as if to say, "You're the intruder here." You whisper, "Go away," and it doesn't. Instead, it climbs toward the rafters, vanishing into the dark. You shiver harder. One fringe detail from history: people sometimes tucked heated stones, called bed warmers, into their sheets. Sounds brilliant until you realize those stones could scorch linen or roll into awkward places mid-sleep. You'd try it anyway if you had one, but alas, tonight you're relying on body heat and prayer. You adjust the blankets, pulling them tight around your neck. The fur prickles against your skin, slightly damp, but marginally better than the air outside. You imagine the people who once slept here, lords, ladies, maybe a visiting bishop or two. They all endured the same thin cold feet, smoky air, and the soft percussion of vermin in the night. Historians still argue, whether medieval people bathed often enough to keep these conditions tolerable. Judging by the smell wafting through the corridor, the answer is a confident no. You exhale slowly, watching your breath bloom like fog in the candlelight. You think about how much effort it takes just to exist here. Every comfort you take for granted: fresh sheets, warmth on demand, pest controls centuries away. Yet, somehow, they called this luxury. The peasants outside, after all, were sleeping in wooden huts with open fires and mud floors. At least you have walls that won't catch fire if you sneeze too hard. The candle sputters, its flame shrinking into a weak orange bead. Shadows crawl across the walls, stretching like lazy cats. The cold deepens. You feel it crawling up your legs, wrapping around your chest, nipping at your ears. You curl tighter. Somewhere above, the wind howls through the arrow slits, moaning like a ghost with unfinished business. Then a small mercy. Someone, maybe a servant or a guard, walks by and tosses another log on the fire in the great hall. The faint crackle reaches your ears. and the barest trace of heat drifts in through the gap beneath your door. It's not enough to warm you, but it's enough to remind you that warmth exists somewhere. You close your eyes, willing yourself to sleep. The straw shifts beneath you, sighing in protest. The fur smells stronger now, the damp seeping into your dreams. You think of home more at least. Whatever passes for it in your imagination, a place where warmth doesn't cost a forest's worth of firewood and a prayer. Just as you're drifting off, you feel a tickle on your ankle. You scratch, half asleep, then freeze. The tickle moves. You sit up fast, heart pounding, and strip the blanket back on nothing. Just straw. Maybe it was your imagination. Maybe you settle back down, trying to ignore the phantom itch. You whisper to the darkness, "Next time, I'm bringing a sleeping bag." The wind answers with a low, mournful sigh through the chimney. The night feels endless, but eventually the sky begins to pale through the narrow arrow slit that passes for your window. You didn't sleep so much as drift in and out of consciousness between rat patrols, phantom itches, and your blanket's damp embrace. Your body aches from the straw, and your joints sound like an old door when you stretch. Somewhere, a rooster crows mockingly, as if proud to have survived the cold when you barely did. You drag yourself upright, immediately feel the draft that's been haunting your chamber since you arrived. It snakes around your ankles, brushes your neck, sneaks down your collar like a mischievous ghost. You pull your cloak tighter and mutter, "How many holes can one room have?" Then you look around and get your answer. A lot. Every seam, every crack between the heavy stones seems to breathe. You hold your hand near the wall and can literally feel air moving through it. The door doesn't seal it, simply leans against a frame in a gentleman's agreement to stay closed. And that window, it's basically a glorified slit for arches, now serving as a personal wind tunnel. You think about the builders, those proud masons who shaped every stone by hand. They made sure the walls could withstand catapults, but apparently forgot about breezes. Historians still argue whether drafts and castles were considered an unavoidable nuisance or a necessary evil after all. Some airflow was crucial to prevent suffocation from smoke. But as another gust sweeps through, you decide that balance was not achieved. You shuffle toward the door and push it open. The corridor greets you with a rush of even colder air, funneled like a wind tunnel straight from the outer gate. Torches flicker violently, smoke trailing in trembling ribbons. Somewhere, tapestry flaps against the wall like it's trying to escape. The servant from yesterday's same one, missing a tooth, shuffles past, hugging a bundle of firewood. "Mind the drafts, milord," they warn with a knowing grin. They bite hard in wolves. You nod grimly. You're already aware. You pass through the main hall, where the chill performs its grandest trick, moving through space like a living creature. One corner feels almost tolerable, while another could flash freeze a chicken. The reason, you soon realize, is architectural. The castle's open layout, marvel of defense and hierarchy, is also a perfect conduit for cold. Every archway, every stairwell, every crack acts like a trumpet for the wind. And then there are the trapdoors. You don't notice them at first, just faint outlines in the floorboards near the dais. But when a servant lifts one to fetch ale from the cellar, you feel the temperature plummet another degree. The air that rises is thick and icy, smelling faintly of mold and wet stone. Keeps the wine cold, the servant says cheerfully. You nod, teeth chattering. It also keeps you cold. Down in the undercroft, the chill deepens into something almost sentient. You peek through the open hatch and glimpse darkness layered in frost. Barrels glisten faintly. Chains sway on invisible drafts. You can't help thinking this would make a perfect horror movie setting. Then you remember it's just storage. You close the trapdoor fast, as if sealing away a ghost. One odd fact: some castles were designed with intentional floor gaps near hearths or halls, letting smoke and heat drift to upper chambers. In theory, this created natural ventilation and warmth. In practice, it created uneven heating and the occasional surprise gust up your robe. You experience this firsthand when a random puff of warm air shoots from below, momentary bliss, followed by a second that smells faintly of stew, disappointment. You wander the corridors, torch in hand, noting the way each arch seems to whistle as wind threads through. The sound is strange high, mournful, like a distant flute. It's almost beautiful in a haunted wind organ kind of way. But beauty doesn't warm your hands. You duck into a side passage, thinking maybe smaller means warmer. Wrong again. The stones here are slick with condensation, the air heavy with the scent of old mortar. You realize the castle is essentially a giant refrigerator every surface, designed to repel comfort. One fringe tidbit comes to mind. In some medieval households, servants stuffed sheep's wool or straw into window gaps to reduce drafts. You decide to try it. You grab a stray piece of rush from the floor and jam it into a crack. The wind mocks you by shifting direction. Fine, you whisper. You win. You pass through the kitchen next, drawn by the faint promise of warmth. It's busier now, pots clanging, cooks shouting. The fire in the oven roars, a small sun in this frozen world. You hover near it, basking in the heat until one of the cooks snaps out. You'll spoil the bread. You retreat, warmth evaporating instantly as you step back into the corridor. There's no escaping the drafts. Even in the chapel, supposedly a place of solemn stillness, the candles shiver. You watch the flame bend as a current slides across the floor, whispering over your boots. The priest, mid-prayer, pauses to adjust his robe. God sends the wind as a test. He murmurs. You think? More like a prank? Historians still debate whether tapestries genuinely helped against drafts or were mostly decorative. The truth is probably somewhere in between. The ones here, faded scenes of hunts and saints, shift subtly every time the wind sighs. It's eerie-like the figures themselves are breathing. Night creeps in again, and with it, the cold sharpens. You retreat to your chamber, now fully aware of the castle's cruel humor. You stuff a cloak against the gap under the door, wedge a plank over the arrow slit, and curl up under your fur pile. For a moment, you think you've finally conquered the draft. Then, faintly, you hear it, a whistling from behind the wall. A cold thread snakes across your neck. You sigh. The castle, smug and ancient, has found another route. You pull the blanket over your head, breathing into the small cocoon of your own warmth. You can hear the wind moaning through the stone like distant singing, haunting, but almost soothing. Maybe this was how people learned to sleep through anything. Your last thought before drifting off is half amusement, half resignation. Maybe the ghosts are just trying to close the windows. Morning again, if you can call it that. The sun barely filters through the slit in the wall, and the weak light paints your room a shade of gray, so dull it feels like the concept of warmth has been erased from the universe. You stretch, half expecting frost to crack off your joints. Outside, the wind sighs through the courtyard like a disappointed teacher. You shuffle toward your window, a narrow opening covered not with glass, but with a sheet of oil parchment stretched tight across a wooden frame. The thing looks like a cross between a lampshade and a skin drum. You touch it gingerly. It crinkles. The light coming through is murky, diffused, and weirdly yellow, like perpetual evening. You've just discovered why windows in medieval castles were more decorative than functional. Historians still argue whether early castle windows were meant more for defense or light. Judging by your numb fingers, light wasn't winning the battle. The openings were narrow to keep out arrows and invaders, but they also kept out every whisper of warmth. In summer, maybe it worked. In winter, it's an architectural betrayal. You wipe a finger across the parchment surface. It's stiff, oily, and slightly sticky. That's because it's been treated with animal fat to make it translucent and water resistant. You try not to think about which animal donated it. The smell offers a clue. You recoil, lower down the hall. One window actually has horn painstainedly sliced sheets of cow horn, polished and layered like primitive plastic. The light they let in is amber, soft, and eerily beautiful, but they're brittle, expensive, and warped in damp weather. You press your nose close, trying to catch a glimpse of the outside world. All you see is your own breath fogging the horn's surface stuff. The servant with the missing tooth passes by again, carrying a bucket of sand to scatter on the icy floor. You ask him, "How do you people stand it?" He shrugs. "Don't know any better, do we?" Then, with a grin, "At least the horn windows don't break when the wind hits. Glass is for kings." That's right. Glass is rare, here almost mythical. In England, by the 14th century, glass was still a status symbol reserved for cathedrals and the most extravagant nobles. Even then, it was tiny pieces set in lead lattice, not the big clear panes we imagine. The wealthy might boast about having glass in their chambers, while you, the unlucky castle guest, get treated cowhide and frostbite. A gust of wind rattles the parchment. It sounds like distant thunder. You instinctively pull back. The material flaps slightly at the edges, where the fat has dried and cracked. You imagine it tearing open in a storm, snow blowing and like powdered death. Someone once told you that nobles used to hang thick curtains across their window slits during winter, both to block drafts and to keep the darkness feeling less infinite. You wish you had one. Now, in the Great Hall, you find people gathering around the one window that actually opens outward, a kind of medieval skylight above the hearth. It's been propped open slightly to let smoke escape. The result? Half the hall is now a fog of icy mist, and the other half smells like burnt meat and misery. The cook coughs, waving her ladle like a weapon. "Close that hole, or I'll freeze the stew." She barks. Someone laughs, a sound that dies quickly in the cold air. You find a small bench beneath another slit window, where the light filters in just enough to see the frost patterns forming on the stone. They look like delicate feathers, ephemeral art etched by suffering. You run your finger across one and watch it vanish instantly, leaving a wet mark behind. The castle is alive in its own way, breathing, sweating, freezing, thawing, always changing, never warm. You overhear two guards talking near the doorway. One complains that during storms, snow sometimes blows straight through the window slits. "Had to shovel it out of my chamber last winter," he says. The other just grins and replies, "At least it keeps the rats clean." You decide not to ask for details. Fringe fact time to combat the draft. Some lords installed shutters made from multiple layers of wood and leather, secured with iron hinges. When shut, they helped a bit, though not much. When open, they might as well have been banners inviting the wind to attack. Some even stuffed moss or straw around the frame's nature's version of weather stripping. You consider doing the same with the hem of your cloak. You make your way up the spiral staircase to the parapet, where the real windows, if you can call them, that stare out across the frozen landscape. From here, you see everything: the pale forest, the smoking chimneys of peasant huts, the river frozen solid like a silver ribbon. The view is breathtaking, literally, because the wind immediately steals your breath. You hunch over, grip in the stone battlement, and wonder how soldiers managed watch duty up here for hours. The answer: with layers of wool, mead, and poor life choices. You last about 30 seconds before retreating inside back in your chamber. You try to block the draft by stacking your boots, cloak, and what's left of your dignity against a slit. It works slightly. The air still finds its way through. You sigh and sit down, pulling your fur closer. The sound of the wind outside merges with a faint hum of castle light footsteps, clinking metal. Distant laughter, that sounds more like resignation. Historians still argue whether people in medieval castles were genuinely miserable in winter, or if they just accepted it as normal. Some records describe nobles retreating to smaller winter chambers, rooms within rooms lined with wooden panels, tapestries, and furs. Maybe those spaces were cozier, but here, tonight, in your stone cell with your oiled parchment window flapping in the wind, You can't imagine anything less cozy. A knock on your door interrupts your thoughts. A maid peeks in, holding a bundle. Extra covering for the milord. You accept it gratefully till you realize it's a rolled up curtain, stiff with old wax. She helps you hang it over the slit, and suddenly the room dims into a softer gloom. For the first time, you feel a slight difference, less wind, less bite. It's still cold, of course, but now it's your cold, contained and familiar. You settle down, listening to the curtain rustle faintly as another gust brushes past. Outside, the world howls. Inside, it's just you, your breath, and the faint comfort of knowing the window won't rattle you awake again. You whisper, it's almost fondly, "Thank you, cowhide. You're doing your best." You wake again in half darkness, unsure whether it's dawn or just another cloudy medieval morning. Your breath still hangs in the air like a ghost, and your blanket has grown stiff where condensation froze overnight. But the moment you sit up, you're assaulted by a new sensation. The smell is not dramatic at first, just a faint, earthy tank. But as your senses sharpen, the reality hits you. The entire chamber smells like damp wool, unwashed bodies, and something vaguely rodent-adjacent. You wrinkle your nose, pull your cloak tighter, and think, wow. So this is how history smells. The truth is, medieval castles stank, even by the standards of their own time. Without plumbing, proper ventilation, or modern notions of hygiene, odor was a permanent tenet. And in winter, when nobody dared bathe, it became the reigning monarch. You stand up, stretch, and realize your cloak has absorbed every smell in a 5-meter radius. If scent had weight, you'd be dragging yours behind you like a second shadow. You step into the corridor, and the smell intensifies. The air is thick with wood smoke from last night's fire, mingled with the rank sweetness of old rushes rotting underfoot. Someone must have spilled ale recently, soaked into the straw and fermented overnight. Every step releases a whiff of stale barley. It's like living inside a damp pub carpet. As you make your way toward the great hall, you pass a small wooden door. From behind it, you hear dripping, the latrine or garderobe, as the locals proudly call it. You hesitate, then peek in. The stench hits you like a physical blow. The narrow stone seat juts out over what looks like a vertical tunnel disappearing into blackness. Somewhere far below, water, or at least a sludgy version of it, trickles toward the moat. You recoil instantly. The smell follows you out like a curse. Historians still argue whether castle garderobes were marvels of medieval engineering or just glorified holes in walls. You lean toward the latter. Some even claim that nobles stored clothes in garderobe niches because the ammonia fumes killed lice. That's one of those fringe facts that's both disgusting and impressively practical. You make a mental note never to borrow anyone's cloak. Back in the hall, servants are sweeping old rushes from the floor, replacing them with fresh ones. You watch as they scatter bundles of reeds mixed with dried herbs, lavender, thyme, maybe rosemary. The result? A temporary illusion of cleanliness. For a few glorious minutes, it almost smells pleasant, like an overgrown apothecary. Then the air shifts, and the underlying musk of unwashed humanity reasserts dominance. A hound ambles past, sniffing the rushes, then flops down to scratch itself vigorously. The scratching sound is so loud it echoes off the stone. You glance at the servant nearby. He shrugs. Better him than the fleas. Ah, yes, the fleas. You scratch your neck reflexively. No matter how much fur or cloth you wrap yourself in, they find you. They leap, they bite, and they're everywhere bedding, straw, even inside boots. You swear you can feel them holding nightly meetings to coordinate attacks. Some people try to fight back with sachets of herbs or vinegar-soaked rags. Our success was limited. The cold might kill a few, but the survivors were hardy little generals. Historians still debate how much disease spread through these infestations Some blame the constant proximity for outbreaks of plague and camp fever, while others suggest that castle fleas were less lethal, if no less annoying. Either way, your ankles are losing the battle. You grab a half-burnt candle from the table and peer into the corners of the room. The soot marks crawl upward, blackening the ceiling. Centuries of fire smoke have coated every surface in a fine film of grime. It's the medieval version of wallpaper. You run your finger along the edge of the mantle. It comes away black. You wipe it on your tunic, instantly regretting it. A cook, Q, brings in breakfast porridge and something resembling salted fish, and the warmth of the food releases new scents. Brine, wood, wet cloth, human sweat. It's an olfactory symphony of misery. You try to eat anyway, telling yourself it's authentic atmosphere. Halfway through your meal, a rat scurries across the beam overhead. Nobody reacts. Apparently, it's part of the decor. You can't help but laugh quietly. Guess even the rats can't find warmth elsewhere, you mutter. The servant beside you smirks. They stay, 'cause they like the company. Fringe tidbit. In some castles, cats were kept not just as Mausers, but as good luck charms. Killing one could be a serious offense. You spot a scrawny gray cat by the hearth, licking its paw. You send it a silent thanks for its service to humanity. As the day drags on, you realize how every smell tells a story. The burnt temps in the air means someone's fire went out last night. The musty odor in the corridor tells of wet cloaks hung too close to the wall. The sour note by the door. Ale, spilled days ago, fermenting into oblivion. Each scent is a chronicle, written not in ink, but in funk. You wander down to the kitchens again, seeking a moment of heat. The smell here is different, richer, more layered. Smoke from the hearth mingles with roasting meat, onions, and the faint sweetness of baking bread. You inhale deeply, nearly swooning with relief. Then a burst of steam from the cauldron hits your face, bringing with it a whiff of boiled turnips. The magic is gone. A kitchen boy coughs, wiping his nose on his sleeve. You're reminded that ventilation was still primitive. Smoke collects in the rafters, staining the beams and stinging your eyes. You cough too, sharing in the communal suffering. The boy laughs. That means dinner's cooking proper, he says proudly. You can't help but admire the resilience. To live in these conditions and still find joy in hot food or a moment by the firelids, a kind of heroism. You think about modern air fresheners, about scented candles and electric diffusers, and wonder what a medieval lord would have paid for one. Probably a small fortune. As night falls, the castle air thickens again. The torches sputter, releasing a greasy smoke that clings to your clothes. You head back to your chamber, nose half numb from the constant assault. When you finally lie down, the bed smells like everything else. Smoke, sweat, straw, and faint despair. But somehow, that combination has grown almost comforting. You smile to yourself in the dark. Maybe the trick isn't to fight the stenches, to accept it. In a place where warmth, comfort, and hygiene are rare luxuries, the smell is proof that life goes on. It's the scent of survival. You pull your blanket up to your chin and whisper, "Good night, medieval world. You smell awful." The next morning, you wake to something even worse than the smell of the sound. A relentless metallic clatter echoes through the corridor, punctuated by shouts, the bark of dogs, and the hollow thud of boots on stone. You roll over, groaning, but the noise doesn't stop. It's not an attack. It's just the castle being alive, loud, and utterly indifferent to your need for rest. You drag yourself up, rubbing your temples. The air outside your chamber is buzzing with activity. Servants hauling logs, guards stomping down the hall, kitchen boys sprinting past with buckets of water that slosh dangerously close to your feet. It's chaos wrapped in routine. You can't help but marvel, how did they all function on this little sleep? The acoustics of the castle are partly to blame. Stone walls, high ceilings, and bare floors make every sound bounce and amplify. A single cough in the Great Hall sounds like an avalanche. Historians still argue whether this echoing quality was intentional to impress visitors with grandeur, just an unfortunate side effect of fortification. Either way, there's no such thing as quiet hours here. You follow the sound of hammering to the courtyard. Blacksmiths are already at work, shaping nails and horseshoes. Each strike rings off the stone like thunder. The vibrations travel straight up your spine. Even the crows perched on the battlements seem irritated, cawing in protest. You mutter, who needs alarm clocks when you have medieval industry? Back inside, the castle's internal noises form a different kind of orchestra. Somewhere above, a servant drags a chest across the floor at an endless grate that makes you grind your teeth. Down the corridor, someone's practicing the lute, badly. The plucked strings squeal and die, like a cat trying to sing. A fringe tidbit floats into your mind. Castles were so acoustically unforgiving that minstrels often performed in corners or alcoves to soften the sound. The Great Hall's stone surfaces could make even the most graceful melody sound like someone strangling a harp. You imagine medieval musicians constantly fighting the echo. Suddenly, you feel a kinship. You pass the chapel next, drawn by a deep, droning chant. The monks' voices reverberate through the vaulted chamber, turning Latin prayers into rolling waves of sound. It's haunting, beautiful and, of course, loud. You stand in the doorway, half mesmerized, half wondering how anyone could meditate with that much echo bouncing off their skulls. The same acoustics that make music celestial also make arguments legendary. Two guards near the stairwell are shouting over something trivial. Who gets the last chunk of salted pork? KB. But their voices carry through the entire upper floor. Within minutes, you hear the cook yelling from below. If you're going to fight, take it outside. The irony is delicious. Outside is colder and louder. You slip into the Great Hall, hoping for a moment of calm. Instead, you walk straight into the morning routine. Benches dragging, logs cracking in the hearth, and a flock of geese honking as they're herded through for slaughter. The floor vibrates underfoot. Someone sneezes, and three others shout "bless you" in near unison. It's like living inside a medieval drum. There's a reason for the racket, though. The walls that trap the cold also trap sound. In winter, when everyone's indoors, every footstep, every cough, every whispered complaint becomes a shared experience. Privacy is non-existent. You could whisper your deepest secret here, and the kitchen would know it before lunch. Historians still debate how people coped. Some think they simply adapted raised their voices, tuned out the noise, and treated life like one long communal event. Others suggest that nobles retreated to smaller solar rooms, not just for warmth, but for a bit of acoustic peace. You find that theory convincing. As the day stretches on, the castle's symphony evolves. The hounds in the kennel start their afternoon chorus, baying in uneven harmony. The hammering from the smithy turns rhythmic, almost hypnotic. In the hall, someone drops a platter crash, followed by laughter and a servant's flustered apologies. It's a constant soundtrack of clatter and chatter. It's punctuated by the deep hum of life. You try to find a quiet corner near the stairwell. The only sound here is the occasional drip of melting frost from the ceiling. You close your eyes, finally starting to relax, then a sudden shout echoes down from the tower. Incoming cart. You open your eyes, just in time to see two servants maneuvering a wheelbarrow loaded with firewood straight past you. Peace is officially canceled. A French fact that might make you smile. Some castle owners supposedly used reed mats or hangings, not just for insulation, but to dampen sound. The wealthy even-lined walls with wood panels to absorb echo. You glance around your bare chamber and realize why your head rings like a bell. No such luxury here. The stones are naked, unrepentant, and determined to magnify every squeak of your boots. Later, at supper, the noise level peaks. The hall fills with the clatter of trenchers, mugs, and spoons scraping against wooden bowls. Someone starts a song. Another joins in, off-key. You can't help but laugh. It's deafening, chaotic, but weirdly joyful. Maybe that's the secret. When the cold and discomfort wore you down, the noise reminds you you're still among the living. After dinner, the hall slowly empties. The echoes fade, replaced by the softer sounds of crackling logs and murmured good nights. You retreat to your room, closing the heavy door behind you. For a moment, you savor the illusion of quiet. But then, faintly, through the wall, you hear someone snoring, loudly. It's the kind of snore that sounds like a dragon with a chest cold. You stuff straw against your ears. It doesn't help. Somewhere else, a baby cries. A dog whines. A gust of wind moans through the corridor, and the door creaks as if laughing. You sigh. There is no silence in a medieval castle and varying degrees of noise. You roll onto your side, muttering, "At least the rats are quiet tonight." Just as your eyes start to close, a guard's horn blares from the gatehouse along, mournful note signaling the night watch. The sound rolls through the walls like thunder. You smile bitterly in the dark. "Perfect timing," you whisper. "Wouldn't want to fall asleep or anything?" You pull your blanket tighter, listening as the echoes fade into the distance. In the end, the noise becomes oddly comforting, like the heartbeat of a living thing, chaotic and impossible to escape. The following morning, you wake with the unmistakable sensation of something crawling across your face. You swat reflexively, but it's too late. The tiny creature darts away into your hairline and disappears. Congratulations, you've just met one of your most loyal winter companions, the bed bug. You sit up, scratching furiously, and glance at your bedding. The straw mattress, once just lumpy, now seems actively hostile. Tiny brown flecks, the surface evidence of your nocturnal invaders. You lift a handful of straw and spot movement beneath. You drop it instantly. "Nope," you whisper. "Absolutely not." The reality sinks in. Medieval sleeping arrangements were an open invitation to all things that crawl, bite, or scuttle. Your straw mattress is not a sealed cushion, but a sack loosely stuffed with whatever dried vegetation the servants could find. Hay rushes, even heather, if you're lucky. And over time, that mix becomes paradise for insects, especially in winter when the warmth of your body is the only heat source in the room. Historians still argue whether straw mattresses were regularly changed. Some sources claim households replaced the straw seasonally. Others suggest it was done only once a year or when the smell became too undeniable to ignore. Judging by your current predicament, this one hasn't been refreshed since the last coronation. You get up, determined to shake out the bedding. The moment you lift the blanket, a puff of dust, and something else rises. You cough, waving your hand. The air smells faintly of mildew, sweat, and despair. The servant with the missing tooth appears in the doorway, smirking. "Bit lively, is it?" he says. You glare. Lively is one word for it. He helps you carry the straw sack outside to the courtyard. As you dump it out, you realize the movement wasn't your imagination. Dozens of tiny shapes scatter across the frost. Fleas, lice, and their bedbug cousins, all leaping for cover. You take a step back, vowing never to complain about modern laundry again. The servant grins and gestures to a nearby fire pit. Some folk warm their bedding or the coals. Kills most of the beasties most. He tosses a few dry rushes into the flames for emphasis. You decide most is good enough. Together, you hold the blanket near the heat. The fabric steams, the smell worsening before it gets better. Fringe tidbit: people in the Middle Ages sometimes added dried herbs or wormwood to their bedding as a natural insect repellent. The idea was that the strong scent drove out pests. Whether it worked is debatable, but the result was at least a mattress that smelled slightly less like barnyard. You resolve to find some herbs later, if only for psychological comfort. You glance at the straw now. It's blackened at the edges from the fire, and realize it's still damp from last night's humidity. No wonder the bugs thrived. You spread it then, hoping the winter sun, pale and weak as it is, will dry it out. While you wait, you wander to the servants' quarters. Here, the sleeping conditions somehow look worse. Bed rolls stacked side by side on the floor. No privacy, no warmth. One boy snores loudly beside a heap of hay that's clearly shared between 3 people. You can practically see the fleas celebrating. You suddenly feel a strange camaraderie, misery, love's company. After all, a scholarly debate flickers through your mind. Some historians believe fleas and lice were so ubiquitous in medieval life that people stopped noticing them altogether. It wasn't that they didn't itch, that everyone itched equally. You picture an entire population casually scratching through daily prayers, teas, and feasts, and the thought is both funny and horrifying. You return to your chamber with your now refreshed bedding. The straw crackles as you rest up it into the sack. You smooth the top and sigh, hoping this buys you at least one bite-free night. The servant offers a final piece of advice. Keep your boots by the bed. Rats don't fancy climbing over leather. You pause, mid-motion. Rats. He shrugs. They come for the crumbs. You look down and see a few scattered bits of last night's bread near the hearth. You scoop them up fast, shuddering. It's one thing to share a bed with insects. It's another to wake up next to a whiskered roommate. Later that evening, you decide to sit by the fire and observe castle life rather than face your mattress too soon. The servants laugh, the dogs doze, and someone plays a low tune on a wooden flute. It's oddly peaceful until a mouse scampers across the hearthstones, causing a brief commotion. The cat, naturally, does nothing. You can't help chuckling. So this is home, you murmur, a smoky, drafty, pest-filled fortress, and yet, somehow, it works. People laugh, eat, sleep, and wake again. It's survival, wrapped in routine. You think about modern bed and clean sheets, soft pillows, mattresses that don't double as ecosystems. But then you realize something unexpected. In this harsh, uncomfortable place, every small comfort feels monumental. A warm fire, a dry blanket, an itch-free night, those are victories. Historians still argue about how much people complained in their own time. Few written records mention discomfort. Perhaps it was too normal to note. Maybe nobody thought "I'm freezing and itchy" was worth writing down. But you can imagine a weary scribe pausing over his parchment, scratching his head, and thinking, there must be a better way to live. When night finally returns, you crawl under your freshly aired blanket. The straw crinkles softly beneath you. It's not cozy, exactly, but it's tolerable. The bugs seem to have retreated for now. You close your eyes, grateful for even that. Then, just as you're drifting off, you feel a faint tickle on your arm. You freeze. Is it a hair? A loose thread? You decide not to look. Some battles, you realize, are better ignored. You chuckle quietly into the darkness. Fine, you win again, medieval life. The fire pops once, as if in applause. You wake before dawn, not because of light or noise this time, but because something heavy lands squarely on your feet. You jolt upright, startled, and stare down at a bundle of fur and pause the castle dog, seeking warmth. He looks at you like this arrangement was mutually agreed upon. You sigh, shift your toes, and let him stay. It's hard to argue with four-legged heating. When you finally crawl out of bed, your breath fogs again in the stale air. You pull on your boots and wrap your cloak around your shoulders. The day's first task is finding food. In modern times, you just walk to a kitchen stocked with options. Here, breakfast is a small miracle if it exists at all. Down in the great hall, the hearth is barely burning. The servants are already awake, their faces pale in the flickering light as they scrape the ashes to coax a new flame. Someone hands you a wooden bowl of grulots, boiled in water. No salt, no milk. You stare at it, unenthused. Is this it? The cook nods proudly. Hot, ain't it? It is hot, and that's its best quality. You spoon the porridge into your mouth. It tastes vaguely of smoke and iron, probably from the pot. You remind yourself that calories are survival, not pleasure. The castle dog wanders by, gives your bowl a longing look, and you sigh, sharing a spoonful. You both wince. Historians still argue how balanced medieval diets actually were. Nobles ate better than peasants, sure, but in winter, even they faced shortages. Root vegetables, salted meats, stale bread, and thin ale kept people alive, not satisfied. You take another bite, chew, and think. So this is what history tastes like: chewy disappointment. The fire crackles weakly, sending up sparks that die before reaching the chimney. You hold your hands toward it, trying to leach some warmth. Around you, servants shuffle in and out with buckets, logs, and trays. Every time the door opens, a slice of freezing wind sneaks in. You notice how everyone instinctively hunches, shoulders to ears, like human turtles. A fringe tidbit surfaces in your memory. Medieval people sometimes added beer or wine to their porridge for flavor and warmth. You eye the ale jug sitting nearby and briefly consider it, but decide against a pre-dawn buzz. The cook, seeing your hesitation, chuckles. Ain't so bad if you can't taste it. It's comforting as the morning light grows stronger, or at least less dim. You wander into the kitchen proper. The smell is thick, wood smoke, fat, and yeast. Someone's kneading dough on a massive board, hands moving rhythmically through flour that's probably half chaff. You spot a barrel of salted pork. It's brine crusted along the rim. That from last year. You ask. The butcher grins. And still good. Mostly. Food preservation here is a feat of creative desperation. Salt, smoke, vinegar, these are the holy trinity of not dying in winter. The cook shows you a hanging rack of sausages, each one hard as stone, meant to last through Lent. The thought of eating them makes your teeth hurt preemptively. You follow the trail of warmth back toward the main hall, where a group of guards are breaking their fast with hard bread dipped in beer. One of them offers you a chunk. You accept, bite, and immediately regret it. The crust could chip enamel. You dunk it into your ale, and it softens just enough to be chewable. Not bad, you lie. The guard laughs. You get used to it. He swallows another mouthful, then adds, better this than snow. You can't argue with that logic. Historians still debate whether castle kitchens produced food daily or in massive batches, meant to last several days. Judging by the stew bubbling on the hearth, you'd guess the latter. You peek inside the cauldron and spot what could be turnips, onions, and something unidentified. You decide not to ask. As noon approaches, the great hall fills with motion again. Servants lay out trencher's flat rounds of stale bread that double as plates. It's communal dining at its finest. One large bowl of stew shared by 4 people, everyone eating fast before it cools. You notice how no one wastes a drop. When the meal ends, the trencher's soaked with broth are either eaten or tossed to the dogs. The concept of leftovers doesn't exist here. A fringe tidbit comes to mind. The idea of forks hadn't fully caught on yet in much of Europe. Everyone eats with knives and fingers. You join in, awkwardly trying not to stab yourself or drop turnip chunks on your lap. It's oddly freeing messy, yes, but primal. After the meal, you feel sluggish, but oddly content. Hunger in winter is always close, lurking like a shadow. A full belly, even one filled with questionable stew, feels like a victory. You lean back against the wall, sipping weak ale. Hey, and let your body thaw in the FIRELIGHT. Then a servant arrives with a new log for the hearth. It's damp. The moment it hits the flame, a cloud of smoke fills the hall. Everyone starts coughing. You wave your hand, eyes watering as the haze thickens. Is this normal? You croak. A nearby woman nods. Means the wood's still green. Burns slow, lasts long. You can't help but laugh between coughs. efficient and suffocating. Perfect combination. When the smoke clears, you decide to step outside for a breath of air. The courtyard is eerily quiet, except for the crunch of your boots on frost. A few chickens huddle near a wall, feathers puffed against the cold. The wind bites instantly, making your nose sting. You retreat inside, suddenly appreciative of the smoky, noisy chaos you just escaped. As dusk falls, supper feels almost identical to lunch, just darker, louder, and greasier. This time, someone's managed to roast a rabbit, and its aroma briefly transforms the hall into something heavenly. You catch yourself closing your eyes as you chew, savoring actual flavor. The moment passes too quickly. Later, lying in bed again, your stomach warm from stew and ale. You find yourself oddly grateful. Sure, the food's basic, the smells strong, and the hygiene's questionable, but you're alive, fed, and almost warm. You stretch under your furs, listening to the faint scrape of the dog settling at your feet again. You reach down, scratch behind his ears, and whisper, "Thanks, buddy. You're the only heating system that works around here." He thumps his tail once, sighs, and drifts off. You follow soon after, your dreams full of endless feasts where the bread is soft, the air is clean, and the only thing biting you is the aroma of roasted meat. When you wake the next morning, the first thing you notice is the cold. The dog's gone, the fire's out, and your breath looks like ghostly mist curling through the gray light. But something else nags at you. Your head itches. You scratch, freeze, and then scratch again. Slower. No, not again. You sit up, grab a strand of your hair, and inspect it under the pale dawn. Sure enough, tiny white specks cling to it like evil snowflakes. Congratulations, you now have lice. The true medieval accessory. You stumble toward the water basin, splash your face, and grimace. The water's icy enough to hurt. There's no mirror, but the reflection in the metal pitcher tells you all you need to know. You look like you fought a small battle and lost. Historians still argue how common lice were among the nobility versus the peasantry. Some believe everyone, from the king to the stable boy, shared the same crawling companions. Others think wealthier folks had enough help in linen changes to keep infestations manageable. Judging by your current situation, you'd bet on universal suffering. Ask a maid if there's anything to get rid of them. She shrugs and suggests ashes mixed with vinegar. Another offers lard. A third mentions shaving your head entirely. You run a hand through your hair, already dreading the choices. Ashes or baldness, you mutter. Tough call. Still, you decide to try the vinegar route. The scent alone could kill weaker creatures or, at least, discourage them from staying. You dab it onto your scalp and nearly choke on the fumes. The maid nods approvingly. "You'll smell grand now," you cough. "Like a salad." She grins. "Aye, like a noble one." As the vinegar dries, you step into the courtyard for air. The wind bites hard, making your scalp sting even more. Snow's begun to fall, the flakes big and slow. The world looks softer than it feels. You glance toward the well where a servant hauls up water, her hands red from the cold. You realize that for all the castle's grandeur, survival here depends on these small, brutal routines: fetch water, stoke fire, swat pests. Repeat. You pass by the laundry area, where linens hang stiff and frozen on the line. The washerwomen laugh despite the chill, slapping shirts against stones. You ask one how to keep anything clean in this weather. She shrugs. "We don't, much." A fringe tidbit pops to mind. Some medieval people carried herbs, sachets, or pomander's little balls, filled with spices or dried flowers to mask their smell and maybe ward off lice. You imagine everyone walking around, jingling faintly of lavender and decay. You make a mental note to find one. By mid-morning, the vinegar treatment has mostly dried and the itch has eased. You decide to explore the castle again, hoping distraction works better than scratching. You pass through the great hall, where a few guards are dicing on the table, coins clinking softly. One of them nods, bit red on the head. Friend, you scowl. It's vinegar. For lice. The guard grins. So, salad it is then. You can't even be mad. He's right. You continue through a narrow passage that smells faintly of damp stone and smoke. A torch flickers, sputtering in its sconce. You trail your fingers along the rough wallets, wet to the touch, sweating with condensation. The cold isn't just in the air here. It lives in the stone itself. You emerge into a small chamber that serves as a solar. The only room besides the kitchen that's even remotely warm. Sunlight filters through the stained glass, making fractured colors dance across the walls. You take a deep breath, relishing the momentary peace. On a wooden chair by the window, an older noblewoman is having her hair combed by a maid. You recognize the long, steady strokes and realize what's happening. Nitpicking, quite literally. The maid's comb, made of bone, moves through the hair with painstaking precision. Every few strokes, she flicks something into a bowl. You suddenly feel less alone. Historians still debate how effective medieval grooming tools were. Some combs, beautifully carved, survive in museums intricate and elegant, but probably useless against serious infestations. Yet people persisted, combing daily, as though sheer determination might defeat nature. You admire that optimism. The noblewoman catches your eye and smiles faintly. It never ends, does it? You shake your head. Apparently not. She chuckles softly, a sound that feels oddly comforting in the cold. Later, as you walk back toward your chamber, you spot something small scurrying across the corridor floor. For a heart-stopping moment, you think it's another rat, but it's only a spider skittering toward the wall. You let it go. You're fine, you whisper. You're the only one not biting me. You pause outside your door and look back down the hall. Life here is relentless, but oddly rhythmic. Scratch, clean, eat, freeze, repeat. There's a strange beauty in the endurance. You start to see why people built entire civilizations around stone walls and stubbornness. Back in your room, the dog has returned, already curled on your bed. You crawl in beside him, grateful for the warmth. The straw creaks. A few flakes of snow drift through the cracks in the shutters. You scratch your scalp once more, reflex, not necessity. Let your hand rest. The itch is fading. Maybe the vinegar actually worked. Or maybe you've just gone numb. You laugh quietly to yourself, the sound muffled by fur and straw. Medieval life, the original spa day. You whisper. The dog yawns, is unimpressed. You close your eyes and try to drift off. For a moment, you imagine what it would be like to be truly clean hot water, soft towels, shampoo that doesn't double as salad dressing. The thought alone feels luxurious. But then the fire pops. The dog snores, and you realize something important. Even covered in vinegar, even half frozen and lice-bitten, you've adapted. You've become part of this strange, itchy ecosystem, and weirdly, you're almost okay with it. The next morning, you wake to an unmistakable sound, your stomach growling like an unhappy boar. You glance toward the hearth, where the embers have dyed to dull orange. The dog stirs, but doesn't move. The air tastes faintly of wood, ash, and cold iron. You're hungry, it's chilled, and not entirely convinced you slept at all. Still, morning means movement. You roll out of bed, feet landing on the icy stone floor, and instantly regret every life choice that led to this point. You throw on your cloak, muttering something modern and unprintable under your breath, and shuffle toward the hall. But before breakfast, or whatever counts as breakfast here's another ritual to face, the garderobe. You'd been avoiding it, pretending you could just not. But now, nature insists. You light a small taper and follow the corridor, your nose wrinkling before you even reach the door. The smell hits firsthand, unmistakable combination of ammonia, decay, and despair. Lovely, you mutter, pushing it open. Inside, a stone bench with a hole stares back at you. Beneath that, is darkness, a deep, endless drop into the castle's waste chute. You swallow hard, the air sharp with cold and worse things. This, you realize, is medieval plumbing or the lack thereof. Historians still argue how hygienic garderobes actually were. Some say waste was cleverly funneled into the moat. Others suggest it simply piled up in cesspits until brave or desperate workers shoveled it away. You try not to think about which system this castle uses as you perch gingerly. One eye on the hole, the other on the wall. The draft from below is arctic. You can feel it rising through the opening, carrying smells that defy description. You shiver violently, half from cold, half from existential horror. I'd trade 3 Netflix subscriptions for toilet paper, you whispered to no one. A fringe tidbit bubbles up through your disgust. Medieval people sometimes lined garderobe walls with herbs or straw to help mask the stench. You glance around and spot a few dried sprigs stuck between the stones. They're long dead. You doubt they ever worked. Just as you start to relax, a faint squeak echoes from below. You freeze. Another squeak. Then a rustle. You lean forward. Slightly bad idea. Catch the gleam of 2 small eyes reflecting your taper's light. You shoot upright with Olympic reflexes, heart hammering. Rats. Of course, there are rats. You slam the wooden door shut and back away quickly, the taper shaking in your hand. The smell clings to you as you walk. You're not sure if it's real or psychological, but either way, it's unshakable back in the main corridor. You meet a servant carrying a bucket and a weary expression. You've been to the garderobe, then? He says knowingly. You just nod. Ever cleaned that thing? The man shrugs. Only when it threatens the moat. You stare. Threatens the moat. He grins. You'll see come spring. If you pray, you won't still be here come spring. You decide to chase away the memory with breakfast. Today, it's thin broth and hard cheese. You dip the cheese in the broth, trying to soften it, but it still squeaks between your teeth. A guard nearby chuckles. Better than the garderobe, eh? You raise your bowl and a toast. Can't argue with that. Historians still debate whether castles smelled as bad as we imagine. Some argue that the constant smoke from fires, the rushes on the floor, the absence of modern chemicals meant odors just blended into the background and olfactory camouflage. Others think castle life was a nose's worst nightmare. You're personally leaning toward the latter. After breakfast, you venture into the courtyard to clear your lungs. The air outside feels crisp, clean, blessedly empty of scent. You take deep breaths like someone who's just escaped a sewer witch. In a sense, you have. Snow crunches underfoot as you walk along the wall. Sky, a dull pewter above. You pass a stable hand mucking out stalls, and even that smells better than the garderobe. The horses snort, their breath clouding the air. You reach out to one, patting its muzzle. You have no idea how lucky you are, you murmur. The horse flicks an ear, unimpressed. A fringe tidbit about medieval sanitation comes to mind in some castles. Chamber pots were a luxury especially for the sick or elderly. Servants would empty them out the nearest window, often shouting, "Gardes, low, watch out for the water," to warn passersby. You glanced nervously upward, suddenly understanding why that phrase survived into modern slang as loo. The wind picks up, slicing through your cloak. You hurry back inside, past tapestries, stiff with frost. The thought crosses your mind that no matter how grand these walls look, they're basically glorified stone refrigerators filled with smoke, fleas, and poor design choices. Still, there's a kind of grudging admiration in you. The people who lived here weren't stupid. They just had different problems. They built what they could, endured what they must, and joked about the rest. You suppose you're doing the same. That night, as you crawl into bed, you make one silent vow. Never drink too much before bedtime. The fewer nighttime trips to that cold stone hole, the better. You burrow under your furs, pull them tight, and whisper a small, ridiculous prayer to the god of indoor plumbing. The dog, already asleep at your feet, groaned softly in his dreams. You envy him. No worries, no garderobes, no rats in unexpected places. Just warmth, fur, and blissful ignorance. You close your eyes, still smelling faint traces of vinegar and smoke, and try to convince yourself that you'll wake up somewhere cleaner. Maybe even somewhere with a bathroom door that doesn't bite back. The fire sighs. The wind moans through the cracks, and you drift off, half laughing, half praying. Please, tomorrow, no more surprises. Morning again, and the sound of bells jolts you awake. Not the soft chime of a phone alarm. This is a heavy iron clang echoing through the corridors like a metal heartbeat. You groan, rub your face, and peek out from under the blanket. Pale light leaks through the shutters, dust dancing in its path. The air smells faintly of smoke, wool, and cold metal. You stretch, joints popping like old wood. You remember now. It's Sunday, which means chapel. No sleeping in today. You throw on your cloak and trudge toward the great hall, joining a slow-moving procession of half-awake nobles and servants. Everyone looks about as thrilled as you feel. The air is icy, your breath coming out in misty puffs, but no one complains. Religion, after all, is serious business. The chapel is a small stone room tucked off the main hall, lit by flickering candles in a single stained glass window. It's beautiful in a damp and depressing way. The stone benches are even colder than the floor, and the scent of old wax fills the air. You sit down, your cloak bunching under you, and instantly wish you'd brought another layer. The priest begins chanting in Latin. You don't understand a word, but the rhythm is oddly hypnotic. Your mind drifts partly in prayer, partly in survival mode. The others bow their heads, murmuring responses. You follow along, quietly mouthing shapes that could pass for devotion. Historians still argue how deeply religious medieval people actually were. Some say faith structured every moment of life. Others suggest it was more social habit than spiritual fervor. Sitting here, half frozen and sleepy, you lean toward habit. But still, there's comfort in the routine, the steady drone of voices, the glow of candles against stone. Then the incense starts, thick, heady, smoky. It rolls through the chapel, clinging to your throat. You cough once, quietly. Then again, the priest glares, unimpressed. You wave an apologetic hand and try to breathe shallowly. You remind yourself that incense was meant to purify the ear to drive out not just evil spirits, but also unpleasant odors, which, to be fair, is probably necessary in a castle this drafty and unhygienic. You glance around. The nobles are shivering gracefully, like statues of mild discomfort. The servants fidget behind them, eyes drooping. One boy's head nods forward, then jerks back, up classic sleep fight move. You smile faintly as the service drags on. Your stomach begins to protest again. You haven't eaten since last night, and the smell of burning incense mixed with hunger is not ideal. You imagine bacon, pancakes, coffee. Then you remember, this is winter in the 14th century. Breakfast is gruel and possibly regret. The priest raises his hands, voice rising with the Latin verses. You spot his ring gold, shining in the candlelight. Wonder how his fingers aren't freezing. The man must have circulation made of legend. A fringe tidbit crosses your mind. Medieval priests sometimes wore fur-lined vestments in winter, hidden beneath their robes. There's no written rule against it, and honestly, who would blame them? You'd give anything for fur-lined socks right now. Finally, the sermon ends. Everyone stands, stiffly stretching, as though they've aged decades. You shuffle out, blinking in the pale daylight. The courtyard feels almost warm compared to the chapel's stone chill. Someone nearby mutters, "That one went long." You nod in solidarity. Back inside, breakfast is waiting, then ale and yesterday's bread. You chew slowly, appreciating even that. A few servants whisper gossip about the priest's new wine shipment. Someone else mentions a broken window in the tower, and you realize these tiny scraps of conversation are the entertainment here. There's no news feed, no weather app, no podcasts, just people, stories, and the occasional scandal about who borrowed whose cloak. You wander to the window, bowl in hand. Outside, the snow falls steady, softening the world. The castle's edges blur under the white, making everything look gentler than it is. You sip your ale and feel something like peace. Then, of course, draft sneaks through the shutters and hits the back of your neck. You shiver so hard, you almost drop the bowl. The dog, lying by the fire, gives you a judgmental look. Don't start, you whisper. Historians still debate whether castles were as silent as people imagine. In truth, they were full of low, constant sound. Fires crackling, wind whistling through cracks, dogs snoring, servants muttering, bells tolling. The noise never stopped, just changed pitch. You listen for a moment, letting the rhythm of it fill your ears. It's not peaceful, exactly, but it's alive. Later, you decide to climb the tower for fresh air. The stairs twist tightly, narrow as a throat. Your breath fogs with every step. When you finally emerge on top, the view steals your words. The countryside stretches out bare trees, white fields, a gray horizon bleeding into sky. You lean on the parapet, wind biting your cheeks. You can see the smoke from village chimneys in the distance. Each wisp represents a fire, a family, someone else shivering through winter, just like you. It's humbling and slightly terrifying to think how fragile this all is. One bad frost, one broken supply line, and comfort vanishes. You stay there until your fingers ache, then retreat downstairs. The hall feels almost cozy now by comparison. Someone's playing a lute, the tune slow and wistful. You sit near the fire, close enough to feel heat on your face. Close your eyes. A guard nearby hums along, low and off-key. Someone laughs softly. The dog stretches, sighs, and rests his chin on your boot. You realize, not for the first time, that surviving in a medieval castle isn't just about warmth, it's about rhythm. You freeze, you thaw, you pray, you eat, you sleep, and somehow life continues. There's a strange comfort in that simplicity. You leaned your head back, the fire's light dancing behind your eyelids, and think, maybe I could handle this after all. Then a gust of wind howls through the chimney, scattering ashes into your lap. You open one eye, or maybe not. You laugh quietly, brush off the soot, and let the warmth pull you towards sleep. The music fades, the fire settles, and for one blessed moment, the castle feels almost kind. By now, your sense of time has started to blur. Days bleed together, gray dawns, smoky middays, cold nights. You've stopped expecting comfort and started celebrating mediocrity. If your straw bed doesn't itch, your stew has flavor, and your boots stay dry. You count it as a win, but today brings something newer, at least a break from routine. You're invited, somewhat accidentally, to the castle's winter feast. The words food and warmth in the same sentence are enough to make your pulse quicken. You follow the smell long before you see the hall transformed. The rushes on the floor have been replaced fresh ones, surprisingly aromatic with dried lavender and rosemary. Candles line every ledge, flickering gold against the cold gray stone. And the fire roars in the massive heart like it's making up for every shivering night you've suffered. The servants bustled about, carrying platters stacked high with bread, pies, and meat, glistening in fat. You take it all in, your stomach practically cheering. This is what survival looks like, dressed in celebration. You find a seat near the lower end of the long table, where the smell of roasted fowl drifts temptingly close. Your neighbor, talkative guard with a scar and 3 teeth, too few grins at you. Eat quick before the Lord changes his mind, he says. You nod, because that sounds exactly like your luck. Historians still argue how often such feasts occurred. Some claim they were frequent in noble households, part morale booster, part political theater. Others say winter celebrations were rare luxuries, reserved for holy days or moments of victory. Judging by the buzz of excitement around you, feels special. A servant sets down a trencher of bread in front of you, followed by a hunk of roasted goose. You blink, stunned. That's actual meat. The guard laughs. And hot, too. Miracles do happen. You dig in with the vigor of someone who's been living on boiled disappointment. The skin crackles, the fat melts, and for the first time in what feels like centuries, you taste joy. It's smoky, greasy, glorious. You might cry. A fringe tidbit flows to mind. Medieval cooks often coated roasted birds in gold leaf for royal banquets. You glance down at your meal, thankful it's plain. You can barely afford the calories, let alone metallic decoration. Around you, the hall grows loud. Cups clink, dogs bark under the tables, laughter rolls through the air. Someone starts a song off-key but enthusiastic. You can't help joining in by tapping your fingers on the table in rhythm. Then, just as you're starting to relax, a faint chill creeps back in. The door to the courtyard has been left open. A servant rushes to close it, but not before a gust of icy air sweeps through, snuffing out 2 candles. The flame nearest you gutters and dies, leaving you in flickering half-light. You wrap your cloak tighter, determined not to let the cold ruin this rare comfort. You sip from your cup-spiced wine, sweet and sharp, and feel it burn pleasantly down your throat. This, you murmur, is how winter should be handled. The guard beside you raises his own cup in agreement. A warm belly, warm blood, no rats in the stew. You chuckle. High standards, you've got. The lord of the castle rises, cup in hand, to toast his guests. His voice booms through the hall, echoing against the rafters. To the walls that keep the wind out, to the fire that keeps us breathing, and to those who keep both alive. Everyone cheers. You add a silent and 2 indoor heating someday. More food follows. Bread pudding with honey, roasted onions, and something that might be venison stew. You don't question it. You eat like you've been challenged to. Every bite feels like a small rebellion against the cold, the hunger, the endless gray of winter. But feasts end, as all good things do. Eventually, the wine grows thin, the fire burns low, and the laughter softens into tired murmurs. People begin to drift away, some staggering, some steady, all glowing faintly with warmth and drink. You stay a little longer, staring into the coals. Historians still debate how drunk medieval people got at such events. The answer, judging by the snoring already echoing through the hall, seems to be extremely. You decide to keep your wits about you, partly for self-preservation, partly because the garderobe still haunts your memory as you leave the hall. Your breath fogs again. The corridors feel emptier than usual, the torchlight soft. You can hear the muffled wind pressing against the walls, searching for a crack to sneak through. You pull your cloak closer and make your way back to your room, steps echoing faintly. Inside, the fire has nearly died. You kneel, toss on another log, and watch the sparks leap like fireflies. The warmth slowly seeps back into your fingers. The dog's already curled up, one paw twitching in a dream chase. You sit beside him, feeling full in every sense of the word for once. Not from survival instinct, but from satisfaction. You think about how fleeting warmth is in this place. One missed fire, one spoiled barrel, one cold night hand. It all unravels. Yet the people here live, laugh, feast, and rebuild every single day. It's absurd. It's inspiring. You crawl into bed, the straw rustling beneath you. The smell of roasted meat still clings faintly to your hands. You smile in the dark. Not bad for the worst century to sleep through, you whisper. The fire snaps softly. The dog sighs, and you drift toward sleep, dreaming not of comfort, but of resilience, the simple, stubborn human art of making it through another winter's night in a freezing castle and calling it victory. The feast's glow fades into memory by morning. You wake with a dull ache behind your eyes and a mouth as dry as old parchment turns out. Spiced wine hits harder than expected. The fire's long gone out, and your breath fogs in the air again. The dog, ever the survivor, has abandoned you for a warmer corner near the ashes. You sit up slowly, rubbing your temples. Everything is quiet, eerily so. The castle's usual hum of clanging pots and muffled footsteps has softened under the weight of deep winter. You stand, joints cracking, and open the shutters. A wall of white greets you. Overnight, snow has swallowed the courtyard completely. For a moment, it's beautiful, silent, pure, untouched. Then you notice the thin crack forming near your window frame where the frost creeps inward like a living thing. You press your palm against it, and the cold burns through your skin. Yeah, you whisper, still awful. You pull on your boots and cloak, ready to brave the day. The hallways are dim, torches sputtering in their sconces. Every sound echoes louder than usual, the creak of your boots, the faint bark of a dog somewhere below. The wind's long sigh through the arrow slits down in the great hall. A small group of servants huddle near a meager fire. The mood is subdued. Food's running low. You can see it in the way they scrape the bottom of the stew pot, gathering every last bit. You take a bowl, thank them quietly, and sit by the hearth. The soup's thin, but hot, and that's enough. Historians still argue whether medieval winters were truly harsher than modern ones, or if survival simply felt harder because comfort was scarce. You don't need data to decide you're living the answer. Every minute feels like an argument with nature. You stare into the fire, hypnotized by the orange glow. Sparks jump upward, fading into the smoky air. The heat touches your cheeks, but not enough to sink in. Around you, the castle creaks a living creature, settling into the cold. You can almost hear it groan. A fringe tidbit drifts to mind. Some medieval folk believed drafts and cold winds carried illness, evil airs, they called them. To fight them off, they'd hang tapestries, burn herbs, or even sleep with onions near their beds. You smile faintly. You tried the onion trick at this point, if it didn't already smell like half the castle had done the same. After breakfast, you decide to walk the battlements. The air outside bites instantly, slicing at your face. The world below is buried, blanketed in silence. Snowdrifts pile against the walls like sleeping beasts. You pull your cloak tighter and keep walking, boots crunching rhythmically on the frosted stone. The wind is merciless up here, the kind that steals breath and thought alike. Your fingers go numb despite your gloves. You lean against the parapet, looking out across the frozen countryside. The forest is skeletal, the river a solid stripe of gray ice. You can't help but think how small you are against this vast, frozen stillness. And yet, this castle still stands stone stacked by calloused hands, fires lit by weary ones, laughter and survival echoing through its bones, century after century. It's humbling. You realize that even in the worst conditions, people found ways to endure, to build, to hope. Historians still debate whether castles were prisons of privilege or symbols of security. Maybe they were both. From up here, surrounded by cold sky and endless snow, you can feel that paradox. Safety and discomfort, luxury and suffering, all packed behind these walls. Your nose starts to go numb, so you head back inside. The warmth hits like a blanket, even if it's faint. The hall's filled again, people mending clothes, chopping wood, telling jokes through chattering teeth. You pass the cook, stirring a pot of something unidentifiable. She grins. Still alive? Then you nod. Barely. Good enough, she says. We'll make it to spring yet. Somehow, you believe her. Later that night, the wind howls outside, but inside, the fire burns bright. You're wrapped in your cloak, dog curled up beside you, bowl of stew in your lap. You take a bite and actually taste salt, maybe even garlic. It feels like triumph. You think back on everything you've endured. Hear the freezing drafts, the straw mattress, the bugs, the garderobe horrors, the lice, the cold stone floors, and somehow you're still here. Not comfortable, but alive. You laugh softly, surprising yourself. Guess I did survive this, after all. The dog lifts his head, as if to confirm it, then lays back down with a sigh. Outside, the storm rattles the shutters, but you're beyond caring. The fire's glow flickers across the walls, catching in the edges of your breath. It's not cozy, but it's enough. It's what humanity's always done: light a little flame and keep going, no matter how much the world tries to freeze you out. And as your eyes grow heavy, the crackle of the fire becomes the heartbeat of the castle itself, slow, stubborn, eternal. The storm eases, its voice softening into a distant hush. Inside the chamber, the light fades to a slow, amber pulse. You stretch under your furs, feeling the last warmth of the fire breathe against your face. Every sound grows gentle now, the whisper of the wind, the faint sigh of the dog beside you, the steady rhythm of your own heartbeat. You think about the people who once lived like this, not stories in a textbook, but real, shivering souls who faced each winter the same way, with grit, laughter, and just enough hope to last until spring. Every icy dawn they rose, patched the leaks, stoked the fire, and told themselves it would get easier. Maybe it never did, but they survived anyway. You picture the snow melting from the battlements, stripping through the cracks, sunlight returning in slow, golden slices. You imagine warm air finally filling these halls, the smell of fresh rushes, the sound of birds where there was only silence. It's strange, isn't it? Even the harshest winter can't last forever. Not in the past, not in you. You breathe a little deeper, feeling that thought settle like a blanket. The castle may crumble one day, but the warmth you find, however small, stays. So, close your eyes now. Let the cold drift away. Picture the fire shrinking to a single glowing coal, steady and safe. The world outside is frozen, but in here, you're untouched, breathing softly in the quiet heart of history. Good night, traveler of centuries. May your dreams be warm, your bed bug-free, and your next winter, wherever it finds you, a little kinder than this one.